Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to part 6 of Kurosawa before Rashomon. Today we're going to talk about One Wonderful Sunday from 1947. Again, this features on this BFI early Kurosawa box set, and I believe it features on the Eclipse Criterion DVD set. I think it is available in Blu-ray in Japan. Could be wrong about that. Again, someone in the comments can correct me. This is an episodic film about two lovers who spend one wonderful Sunday together. Obviously the title is ironic. It's 1947, set in post-war Tokyo. It stars Isao Numasaki as Yozu, who fought in the war, and Chieko Nakakita as Masako. Yuzo lives with a friend, shares a room with a friend. Masako lives with her sister. They can only see each other on Sundays. They are essentially working poor. They start the Sunday with 35 yen combined. We start with the motif of a cigarette butt that Yozu is eyeing, that's been on the floor, because we find out that he's trying to quit smoking, apart from anything else that costs too much money, and this is a motif that will return at the end of the film. So this is an episodic film where it just follows them throughout the day, their trials and tribulations. But Kurosawa gives us a real feel for bombed out Tokyo, post-war Tokyo. There's like English signage when the Americans kind of took over. There's waste ground. There's a real sense of depression, and we get explicit view of gangsters and the black market and black marketeering, scalping tickets for a concert, for example. So we get a real sense of place and time. The two actors aren't Kurosawa regulars, but they are wonderfully performed, and they are characters that you instantly kind of have a liking for, and you root for, and you're interested in what happens to them, which again is a big step, because there's obviously plenty of films where you don't actually care about the characters, but you do care about Yuzo and Masako. Yuzo, who has obviously seen things in the war, is more kind of depressive. He's just kind of focusing on his situation now. He can't really look to the future. He is obviously very shameful about they don't have their own place, shameful about not having money, whereas Masako is much more upbeat. Yes, she realises the current situation is pretty bleak, but she has hopes for the future, which is obviously a nice balance between the two. If both of them were one way or the other, it just wouldn't be as compelling, or it just wouldn't be very realistic. So they kind of start their Sunday with the 35 yen by going to visit a show house, which is will be selling for 100,000 yen. So obviously Yuzo's not very pleased with this because what's the point, because they're never going to have that amount of money. But again, Misako kind of fantasises about living there, and despite the fact she's got holes in her shoes, but it's, Misako being Misako, she says it means the water can drain out easier when it rains. So another couple comes in and says, oh, this is really cheap for 100,000 yen. So it's just the two viewpoints of one couple who can almost never imagine being able to afford this, and another couple who are like, this is really cheap. But they, Misako and Yuzo overhear that they were looking at a room to rent. So they go visit this room to rent, which is basically a hovel, and even then they can't seem to see any way in which they can afford it. So they're sitting in waste ground, which again, beautifully composed shots by Kurosawa, sitting on barrels next to a building that's obviously been bombed. And then there's kids playing baseball, and Yuzo kind of perks up and asks the kids if he can join in with baseball, which again is also an American sport, which is also huge in Japan now. But that kind of momentary kind of feeling of joy that he gets from just joining in and playing some baseball kind of puts his mind off their worries. So it's a beautiful scene. Of course, it ends in disaster when he has to pay for damages from a local sweet shop and buy some sweets. But as he said, if he didn't do that, they wouldn't have had the sweets at a marked down price. Then he goes to a cabaret, a kind of bar, to meet an ex-colleague, Mr. Sagawa, who isn't actually there, and the staff just think he's on the make, or he's a gangster wanting a handout. So he goes down and meets this character and is given like a free drink just to pretty much go off the premises. The actor will be familiar to you from other Kurosawa films. I apologise for not actually remembering his name, but he's a familiar face. So again, he thought he might have the chance of getting a job there, but the guy never turns up, or doesn't seem to be working there anymore. So again, he's depressed. So they end up going to the side of a railway to have a kind of picnic, and then they come across this almost ghost-like child who is obviously homeless, is very dirty, but the child actually pulls out a wad of money, so the child pretty much has more money than they do and asks to buy one of the rice cakes. And Misako pretty much says, no, you can just have it, you don't need to pay. So despite the fact that they don't have any money, she's happy to give away one of the rice cakes. And of course the kid is just so kind of flabbergasted by that he doesn't actually have to pay for it. It's really shot almost as if the child is this spectral form. And then they go to the zoo, and then it starts raining, which is a great motif. And then they decide to go to this concert of Schubert's Unfinished Symphony, which was where they had their first date. And again, an example of the black marketeering. Scalpers take the last of the 10 yen tickets and start charging 15 yen. And Yuzo has had enough and gets into a fight with them. And then at this point, he's pretty much at breaking point, and they go back to his place and they have like a huge fight. And at this point, you're thinking, why is this film called One Wonderful Sunday? Because it does get very bleak and very depressing fairly quickly. I won't go any further into the plot, but obviously they do have dreams, or Misako reminds Yuzu of the dream they had to open a Hyacinth cafe. But obviously he can't think of anything apart from just the bleakness and the unbearable weight of existence, which does change with a couple of wonderful scenes at the end of the film. There's a scene where they're on swings, which would return in a later Kurosawa film. There is actually a line about how Yuzo feels like a stray dog, which obviously would appear later in a Kurosawa film, literally. There's like an invisible orchestra later in the film, which is quite moving. And there's actually breaking of the fourth wall almost, which is also quite moving. Again, you might watch it and find it a bit sentimental, but I did find it quite moving in places, again, because if you consider where Japan was in 1947, and because Kurosawa has built this world of this city being a broken down shell, people being desperate to survive day to day, I don't think it comes across as being sentimental, but again, that might just be me. From a technical standpoint, it's not Kurosawa's most stunningly jaw-dropping kind of dynamic camera or anything. There's some nice compositions. There's a really good use of axial cuts in a scene later in the film where they're actually sitting on a bench and there's a trash can with literally trash written on the side. But it's a much more kind of reserved, melodramatic film, and there's no kind of dynamic camera particularly in it. It's interesting that these 6 early films so far, pretty much half of them have been too short and half of them have been too long. So again, he's still kind of figuring out who he is and what he wants. The 2 Sanshiro Sagata films are probably too short, but again, some of them were because they were cut. And obviously, The Men Who Tread the Tiger's Tail is only like just over an hour, whereas The Most Beautiful, One Wonderful Sunday, and No Regrets for a Youth are probably all too long. But Kurosawa said himself, out of these early 10 films before Rashomon, it was only film number 7 where he kind of felt he was, becoming an artist and kind of realising what he actually wanted and how to achieve it. And of course, the next one is Drunken Angel, which obviously has Takashi Shimura and an appearance by another actor for the first time in a Kurosawa film that would go on to have quite a relationship with Kurosawa. But back to One Wonderful Sunday, it is a wonderful film. Again, it's not perfect. Again, it's probably a little too long at 108 minutes or so. But there's some wonderful set pieces. It is honest. It is truthful, even to the point of being too truthful at times. Because it does show the misery of the situation quite a bit. I mean, there's glimmers of hope for the future. But again, if you look at the poster and One Wonderful Sunday, if you're expecting a kind of Japanese singing in the rain, this is not singing in the rain. This is not a particularly upbeat, jolly, life's wonderful type of film. This is Kurosawa being honest about post-war Japan, with a couple who are just trying to survive. But it's another wonderful early Kurosawa film. Again, not perfect, not the polished mastery of later Kurosawa, but still well worth your time, because it does have characters that you genuinely care about, and I would say it's probably the best of the early melodramas, if you want to use that term. But again, let me know if you've seen One Wonderful Sunday and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me for episode 7 in Kurosawa before Rashomon. So this is Solitude Ronin from Solitude Ronin Films, saying thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the future.